You're listening to episode 66 featuring Adrian Bybee.
Train usually came at 10:30 at night. By 11:15, been sitting on those railroad tracks for 45 minutes, no train. And it was at that moment I heard God and basically said, "Your kids don't need life insurance money; they need a father and a leader. Your wife doesn't need money; she needs a husband." And it was really at that moment I was like, "Well, I better get my act together."
Yeah, gotta aim for the top like, hold up, yeah, I can never doubt myself, I know better. All of you critics be acting like you know better. Blowing the smoke, but I know when the dust settles that I'm in my element, it's evident that there's levels to the game.
What's happening, people? Welcome back to the Athletes podcast. And today I'm sitting down with Adrian Bybee. Adrian, I really appreciate the fact that you reached out to me on the social media platform that Taj got us all involved in, and I think this is actually the third shout out that he's gotten in the intros of these shows, because I've had 3 people that did reach out and are now guests on the show, and so far it's been amazing to have everybody on from these different walks of life. And like I said, I'm really glad that you reached out, and I can't wait to dig into some of the things that we talked about when we met before and then today. But welcome to the show. Glad you can make it.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Happy to be on the show. You too, just like you, I'm super grateful to Taj and what he's kind of established, because it does give us a chance to get to know each other from different areas of the country. I mean, without him, I would have never met you. And honestly, it's a great privilege to be on. So
yeah, it's great to meet so many people that are so similar, athletes and in sports, but still from so many different walks of life. So it's really, really cool. But as I said, I love starting things out with 5 questions. So first question for you is, what's your most memorable game that you played in?
Probably the most memorable game, honestly, was probably our senior night against Boise State. And what made it memorable was the fact it was 8 o'clock start night on ESPN, but the temperature was 18 degrees at game time. It was freezing. It was cold. My toes were numb, going up against. And at the time, Boise was undefeated, or like having a shot. Like, okay, here's my last shot going against these guys who also was recruited by them. So it was kind of always an inner battle of, I want to beat them because that was another school that I would have went to as well. And game did not turn out like I wanted to in the slightest, but just the atmosphere, being able to push through this extremely cold weather, which was very interesting because after halftime, it actually warmed up to 20 degrees. And so when we came out of the locker room, I was like, whoa, wow, it's warmer. And my wife and my family, they were all up in the stands. And afterwards, they're like, never again. That was the coldest game that we have ever been to in our life. And so, but I mean, just the overall, what it was, that just picturesque, clears. I mean, the night was clear. If it was just 30 degrees warmer, it would have been even better. But
yeah. What were some of your early influences, or someone that influenced you as a young athlete?
So I'll probably have to start off first with my dad. My dad was a great local high school athlete, and he was the one who I would sit down with him and watch football as early as 8, and we would discuss what football was about. And we were watching NFL, and it's, hey, they're going to do this, they're going to do this, and so he would probably be the first one, and it's because of him that I really saw. Really one of the most inspiring guys for me, which it's very interesting nowadays to say this, but it's Deion Sanders. I remember when he got drafted to the Falcons, I remember watching him, play for the Falcons and then the 49ers and then the Cowboys. And between him and Bo Jackson were kind of my heroes. I'm like, hey, they're doing both sports, and baseball and football were kind of the love. So I would say those 3 really were the inspiration for a lot of the things that I did growing up.
How did you, and this is something that we'll really dig into a little bit later, but how did you get to the school you ended up going to?
Yeah, honestly, it was because I wasn't highly recruited out of high school, being a small town, and coming out of that day and age where it was still like a VHS tape you had to send to the colleges. And so my high school coach, they didn't necessarily recruit or like try to bring people in to recruit us. And so for me, it was looking at, hey, where are maybe some local options, close by that maybe I could go to, and then just putting myself out there and, seeing what type of offers I could get. And so Boise State, Utah State, University of Utah, a couple other ones that were within a couple, 3 hours from where I was, because I was like, maybe that's, close enough in my mind. I was like that it might pull some weight on that end. So that's kind of how I got to there. And then when the offers kind of came back, preferred walk-on, tryout area, and then it really boiled down to school-wise, like which one had the better academic school.
Do you remember the first letter that you got and what your reaction was?
So I didn't get a letter. I got phone calls because it was me like recruiting myself. And so I remember calling, leaving messages for all these guys. And I just remember one time I got a call from Utah State. It was Coach Stevens. He's like, Adrian? I'm like, yeah, this is Coach Stevens down at Utah State. I was like, what? I was like, I didn't know like what to say or what. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. They're like, hey, we want to bring you in as a preferred walk-on starting fall. I was like, okay, what do I need to do next? And so it was kind of surreal because it was like I hadn't heard anything. I'm just leaving voicemail after voicemail, all these different coaches. I'm like, I'm not going to hear anything. Like, I don't even know if this is going to happen. And then I got that call.
Yeah. Career-wise is the last question, and then we'll relax a little bit and dig in a little bit more. Career-wise, what was the epiphany moment for you that you made the right decision? I mean, obviously it's very hard to give up the sport that you love, but what was that epiphany moment that you were on the right track?
My journey like post sports was completely different. Like I had always planned on going to the NFL after playing there for, several years, going and then essentially being like a business consultant. That was kind of my plan A. That's what I always wanted to do. And then when that wasn't going to be like reality, I didn't know what to do. And so I jumped around quite a bit, went to different areas to really figure out like, what is it that I'm going to do? And honestly, for me, it took really up until, really earlier this year, where now it's like, this is what I'm meant to do. Like, it was always areas I'm like, I'm good at this, but I always felt like that's not what I was meant to do. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of kept jumping around, trying to figure it out. And I did well in certain areas. Didn't do so well in other jobs, but I, kind of just look at just like you do at the game of football. It's like, yeah, we didn't win that round. Okay. Let's go back. Let's go to the film and find out what's worked. So really it took me about 13 years to really figure out like, oh, hey, this is it. Like you said, that epiphany moment really happened about last November when I was like, you know what? I'm meant to be a coach, but not the type of coach that, go out and coach on the football field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's finding that path and that with the passion is always a very big deal. So let's backtrack a little bit. So you talked about your early influences. I had the same. There's a reason why I'm a Florida State and Falcons fan, and it is the man Deion Sanders, right? So, I wanted to be him, even down to high stepping with my flags flying as a, 5 or 6 year old. So I understand that influence. When you got out on the football field, let's say when you're a little bit older, did you realize how big of a deal it was to be out on the football field and how much it was going to impact you in your life?
Early on, no. I mean, early on, and I think back, so I started kind of like tackle football. Really in my area, you couldn't start till the 5th grade. Well, I convinced my dad, and my dad went along with it to lie about my age so I could play tackle football in 4th grade. So, and which was really funny because I was always one of the shortest kids like in school. So even as a fourth grader, I'm like 6 inches shorter than all the fifth graders. But I'm just out there because I just loved it. I was like, no, I want to play tackle. I don't want to play flag football. And so, at an early stage, it was just something that, hey, this is fun. I can go and do this. And, I never really thought about like what type of implications I'll have like later on in life other than, hey, this is something that I'm passionate about. It's something I'm good at. And, I like to hit people. I like to, have this kind of adrenaline going on. So that was kind of always the thought process early on. It wasn't until in, college age that all of a sudden now it was, oh, like what happens without it? What type of, does that look like? So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously, once you get to high school, and some people realize it late, some people realize it early, you start to think, oh, there's people watching, right? Oh, like I can get some attention by doing these things. And you said you're from a small town. You had to place a lot of phone calls, right? You got that first phone call back from Utah State, and it was like, all right, I'm coming. You know what I mean? Like where do I sign, right? One of those types of things. When you're in high school though, are you looking at those types of things? Are you paying attention to the academic side of things, knowing that that's going to also impact everything? Or did it kind of hit you as you're like a junior in high school and it's like, okay, it's a little late now?
yeah. So, I mean, going into high school, and it was funny because I remember having conversations with my dad all the time, especially in middle school, junior high. It was called junior high when I was there, but
Mm-hmm.
he was the ninth grade football coach. Yeah, he was my coach, and I remember having discussions about, and it was always kind of that expectation to have good grades. That
Mm-hmm.
was just the expectation in my house. I grew up with two older sisters who were 4.0 students. My dad and my mom were both teachers, and so education was always valued to a certain extent, but it was always, we expect you to be a straight A student. Um, Ninth grade year is when it started to somewhat get real in the fact of, hey, your classes actually are going to matter to not just your GPA, but if you want to go to college and get scholarships. Because when I was in ninth grade, my oldest sister was a senior, and so she was kind of starting to go through the process of college applications, things along those lines. So for me, it was like, oh, okay, because I had an older sister kind of starting to go in that route. I'm like, okay, my grades need to be important. As I started getting into high school, right, junior or sophomore, and especially going in the junior year, I had a whole bunch of friends, and they were kind of more focused on having girlfriends and hanging out with girls and everything. And for me, I'm like, my whole goal has always been to go to the NFL, and I knew in order to go to the NFL, I need to go to college. And then I knew I was like, well, if I need to go to college, I got to make sure I have good grades, because my family can't afford to go and pay for anything. And if I don't get a football scholarship, I got to pay for school because there's no way that my family's going to pay for school. My parents, and so I was like, well, if I got good grades, I could get a scholarship, things along those lines. So it, especially the junior year, that's when it really started to be kind of real. Like, oh, okay, I got to take this serious. And I always joke, I always tell my kids this now, and my parents knew it before, is like, if it wasn't for football, I would have flunked out of high school. I did, like, I could care less. I was like, high school, it's like, I hate high school. I hated going to classes. I would probably say 90% of the time I was actually asleep during class because I was like, I know this stuff. Like, I would just sleep. But I also knew, I was like, I have to be a 4.0 student because I need a scholarship. If I don't get a football scholarship, I got to have an athletic scholarship. So
Mm-hmm.
that was my focus. I'm like, I'm here in school because of football, because I want to get somewhere. And so that really was my drive to be a straight A student, was so I could go play college football.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of people's drive, right? You're just like, sports is what I want to do. I don't want to be in school. I just want to play sports. And you know, once you figure that part out, it's like, okay, where do I go from here? But like and lucky for you, you did have those influences with, sisters who were basically geniuses, and your parents who were teachers, right? It's just like I have to live up to all of this. So there's the extra motivation to be that. Did you said there was no pressure with it, but it was an expectation. Did you feel like if you didn't do that you were letting somebody down? Did you feel that sort of pressure when you were in high school?
There was, I didn't necessarily feel that pressure because that competitive spirit of me, um, especially my older sister she was 2 grades above me, but she always was like, oh, I got a 30 on my ACTs. I'm like, I'm going to beat you. I'm going to beat you. So that competitive drive in me, I was like, I'm tired of her trying to say that she's always smarter than me. Because I know she's not smarter than me. And so I didn't necessarily feel that pressure because for me, I'm like, I had someone I was always trying to chase, right?
Hmm.
And it's kind of that same way, like on the football field, it's like, hey, I'm going to win championships. And so it's like everything that I was doing in the high school I went to, we had been, especially on the football team, we had been at the state, we were the state champions, either took it or were in the championship game for 10 years running. So it was kind of always that, I mean, on the football field, in the school, it was always, for me, I just got in kind of put into this culture that it was just expected to win and excel at everything. It's like you win on the football field. You're either in the state championship or you do take state. So, I mean, I won state championship my sophomore year. We lost it, or that was my junior. That was the only game we lost. And then my senior year, we took it back. And so I was so used to just having all these like really center of influences of you're expected to maintain just this high level. It For me, it didn't feel pressure. It was just I got to live up to that. And I was like, oh, that's okay. That's just what it is. And so well, what do I have to do to achieve that? So I didn't really feel a lot of that pressure, which it probably was because early on when in the playing days as a defensive back or as a running back, you're used to having really those key moments put on your shoulders.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, one-on-one with this receiver, it's up to me to make sure he doesn't catch it. And so early on, it kind of built that mentality of just get it done.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. I was a defensive back. It's either you get it done or you don't. And if you don't, it's so much worse, right? And there's just so much, it's you really are out there on an island, and there's so many things that I've taken from being a defensive back to putting into, real life. So I completely understand that. And um, you just mentioned being at such a high level throughout your entire life. And obviously that informs the rest of your life where you just have that expectation and you expect to excel and you expect to be the best. And then you get to college. And if your experience is anything like mine, you realize, wow, everybody's really good. It's that eye opening. I was an all-star. Well, they were an all-star. They were all state. They made first team this, right? And you, no matter what level you play, I mean, I played Division 3, and it's just like everyone here is an all-star. They're good. They got all the recognition. How did you deal with that, with being a preferred walk-on, as you said, and getting on campus and having to deal with school and a new atmosphere? And obviously you weren't too far from home, but everybody is now on that same level or better. How do you deal with that?
I mean, biggest one was kind of going back is just taking care of me first, taking
Mhm.
care of what I needed to do, and not necessarily comparing myself to those around me, but really is, hey, if I want to be the starter, and I remember having this conversation with my coach after fall camp, um, and they had always kind of planned on redshirting me first year, which they didn't tell me until like after camp. I was like, well, okay, whatever. But I remember he had a whole sheet, basically like a player evaluation sheet, and certain skills, traits, and everything. And depending on how you graded, and his grade was basically you hit this grade and you're a starter. you hit this grade, you're a contributor. This one, you're a practice squad member. This one, it's like you're lucky to be D1 type area. And I remember his first like evaluation came back, and I think on there was, you're going to be a scout team like your entire career. And I remember I looked at him and I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, you're lacking this, this, and this. I'm like, okay, I'll go and develop him. He's like, what do you mean you'll go and develop him? I was like, well, I didn't become who I was in high school just because I was talented. It's never been that way for me. Like, my talent is being able to outwork everyone. And so when I looked at it, I was like, you know what? Yeah, there's some great guys in this DB room. Great guys that have some great speed. They got some great like ball instincts. But I know one thing I have over every single one of them is I will outwork them. One thing I have over every single one of them is the fact that no matter what you tell me, I'm going to be able to push through it. It's always, mentality. Mine was always just kind of this chip on the shoulder. I was always the smallest kid. I'm like, well, I'm going to prove that. It doesn't matter how small I am because I'm going to hit you hard. And so that was always, as I looked at it, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to outwork them all. And I did. And I remember that first year, and it was the funniest thing because I can't remember what game it was. It was like game 4, game 5. And, red shirting. So I'm on scout D. Don't necessarily, the only time I get to know what we're running in the defense is when we're having our once a week meeting. And, Thursday, kind of going over the last little things. And they're like, hey, I want you guys to, I want everyone to take, and he gave us a test. Basically it was like, how the test worked is he would give it to us on Thursday. We had to turn it in on Friday before the game type area. And I remember turning mine in and come around Sunday after film study and everything. He's like, I need to talk to all of you guys about something. Number one, I grade these tests. I take these tests serious because it tells me, where you guys are mentally, like you understand what's going on. But I need to ask. I got 4 of you guys in this room that are starting. I got 4 other guys that are backing up. And then I got a few other ones that are on Scout D. How the hell does the only guy that gets 100% is the one on Scout D? He doesn't even get to play on Saturday. He doesn't even get to travel with the team. He's over there, but yet he's the only one that understands what all you guys are supposed to be doing. Not only that, you guys only put in what the secondary does. He put in what the entire defense does. How is that even possible? And, and it was at that moment that I earned, some respect from him. And I started to get, opportunities to now all of a sudden be on special teams and, eventually earning a scholarship and then starting. But that's really what started it, and looking at it, be like, you know what? I can only control my effort. Yeah, there's some great guys here, but I'm going to outwork every single one of them. So whether that was on the field or, really in the classroom of the football room, that's what I did.
Yeah. I mean, it's something to be said when you don't just know your position, you know the guy to the left and sometimes to the right of you, right? As a corner, there's not always somebody to both sides. But when you know everything that's going on in front of you, and that translates to life essentially. When you can handle more than just your task, it translates very well. Ultimately, sometimes people decide that, oh, you can handle that, so let's give them more, right? When you show that you're capable, you end up getting more responsibility, but that ultimately transfers to that. And you showcase that as a college defensive back, and ultimately that's something that carries on with you throughout life. Now, we talked about your senior night game, and you said you remember how cold it was and, how nobody wanted to be there, how it got 1 degree warmer. I mean, I couldn't imagine. I mean, I used to hate playing in the snow. I played in Pennsylvania, so when it snowed, I hated it. But as defensive backs, we wanted to be the strongest on the field, so we wouldn't wear long sleeves and, so just mental mind tricks, right? what else about that game outside of how cold it was, but that just really stood out to you? And with it being your senior night, essentially it's just about the end of your college career. What about that game really sticks with you besides all those other things you talked about?
I think one of the biggest ones was the fact that the position I was in was so key to like what we were doing on the defensive side of things. It was one where our entire game plan was built around that my position, making sure that I read the guard, the tackle, the pulling guard, the tight end, because Boise's offense, it's not like it was. They only had like about 20 plays, but they ran it out of 40 different formations.
What year was this?
It was 2009. So Kellen Moore's their quarterback there, and that guy, I swear he had 8 sets of eyes. He was like a freaking spider. Like he knew what was going on. Probably the best like college quarterback played against, which is saying something for him. Also played against like Colin Kaepernick. Played against I forgot his name now. Over at Oklahoma, he played with Adrian Peterson at the time as well. Got hurt a couple years into the league. I can't think of his name now.
Yeah,
but
I know you're talking about. Can't remember
either. But far and wide, like Kellen Moore, he had a knack for understanding like what we were doing on defense, and so I had the opportunity. Like my position really was to try to throw him off, but at the same time really reading what they were doing, and so I just and that one meant so much because of the fact that a lot of the things that were happening on defense were really a key factor were placed upon me. And so it was kind of the first time that really the whole defense hinged around me. Like all the other times we played, it was usually around the linebackers or, making sure the D ends would contain certain things. But, just because of that offense and what we're trying to run. So I just remember that pressure being there. And after the first couple series is starting to really get in the flow and starting just like move with really just move well with it, and be in the right position in order so the defense as a whole could make a play. And so that really was probably the most memorable in the fact of that it was kind of all keyed upon me to make sure I was doing the right thing. And one of the plays that really stick out in my mind, it was a 3rd and goal on the 4-yard line. And if the tight end like hit down towards, hit the defensive end, I was supposed to go on the outside of it. And, it was 3rd quarter. Remember looking at him, ball gets hiked, look the tight end. I see the tight end go and crash down. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, I know where I'm supposed to go. For whatever reason, I went on the inside of the tight end as well. I'm like, but I remember going there, and I remember safety coming behind me, and cleaning up the pole. We ended up pulling him to the field goal on that, but yeah. And I remember the safety come off. It's like, Adrian, what were you thinking? I was like, this is the first time that I actually thought on a play all game, and it's because I thought that I went in the wrong direction versus just reacting it. And it was one that was like, man, I've been like all game just been reacting, being able to recognize what was happening. And it was that play that I thought about. I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to do? And I completely did the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And so, for me, as I go back and, I think about all the games really where I had the best success, it's when I had prepared so well going into it that I didn't have to think. And the games where I was actually thinking in it, like I made the most mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why that one really sticks out, because overall it was almost like a flawless game for me, except for that one play. And that one play is just ingrained in my mind. I'm like, man, if I would have went the right way, it would have been like a tackle for loss, made it a little bit harder on that field goal try. But yeah, it was just, overall just, just a good game as far as my role and what I was supposed to do for it.
Thank you for listening to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. We will be right back after this short break. Hey, are you trying to figure out how to navigate this whole college thing? Well, listen up, because the A2A Academy is here to help you navigate everything college prep, both on and off the field. More than just another college prep program, A2A Academy provides you with an all-encompassing experience designed exclusively for high school student athletes who want to excel in sports, school, and life. With A2A, you've always got someone to help you reach your highest potential. What sets A2A Academy apart from the rest? Well, it's simple. Their advisors and curriculum are one of a kind. A2A provides comprehensive support to student athletes and their families, guiding them through the entire college discovery as well as recruitment and application process. Every A2A advisor is a former college athlete as well as an active member of at least one of the leading organizations for college consultants. They've been in your shoes, and they understand the importance of choosing the right college both on and off the field. A2A Academy knows that there's no one size fits all model when it comes to the college planning for student athletes. Every athlete is unique with their own strengths, weaknesses, and passions. That's why the program works. A2A Academy advisors tailor their support to each student athlete's individual needs, helping you find the perfect fit for your academic and athletic goals. So whether you're a young athlete looking to score big in both sports and academics, or a parent wanting the best for your child's future, A2A Academy is here to help you succeed. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity. Visit A2A Academy today at joina2a.com/podcast to learn more about their comprehensive college prep program built specifically to sports student athletes. Again, that's joina2a.com/podcast. Now back to today's conversation. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot, and that's the thing is people don't realize a lot of it is reading and reacting, right? In a split second, right? You have a split second to read and react and see these things happen. And, you know, it when you don't do that, when you aren't reading and reacting to what's in front of you and you think that something's going to happen is when you normally mess up. And I've got those plays as well, so I completely get it. And um so that was your senior night, and you had always had dreams of going to the NFL. How do we pivot from the NFL, and what makes you do that?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it was a couple things that was happening. One, my time at Utah State, our best record there over the 5 years that I played was 4-8. So it's not like we were top dog or anything like that. Which I know the sayings out there. It doesn't matter who you play for; the scouts will come and find you. But a lot of scouts aren't actually going to go to a losing team over and over. Like, yeah, if there is a prospect on there, right? Maybe one or two guys, then they'll get a call by the coach and they'll come and just look at that one, right? But the majority, the rest of the players on the team aren't going to necessarily get a look at. Whereas if you're on a very successful team, scouts are always watching, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, who's this guy over here, right? Because now I want to watch him. So, and I had enough former teammates that were in the league, that kind of went before me. I remember talking with Jarrett Bush, who he played for Green Bay for, I can't remember how many years, quite some time as a corner. I remember him coming back every single off season. He would come back. We would train together in the summer. And I remember asking him, well, how's life in the league? What it's like? And he's like, Adrian, to be honest with you, it's completely different than I ever envisioned. And it's all business. They don't care about you. Like, Green Bay is one of the few places that they, it feels like they kind of care about the players outside of being a player, but it's all business. Like, if someone comes in and, even if they're the same as you, but if they can shave a couple $100,000 or $1 million, they're going to cut you. They're going to let you go. And they don't care. They don't care about your family. They don't care about all these things. And so some of these conversations I had were kind of resting in my mind. And prior to the beginning of my senior year, found out my wife was pregnant. We weren't planning on having a kid. Our plan was kind of go and travel these different cities as a young couple and just, kind of enjoy that ride. And so You know, my first girl, she was born January 4th, you know, so a couple weeks after the season ended. And it just made me kind of reevaluate, okay, what's going to happen? Can I go do pro day? More than likely, my route's going to be possibly getting an invite, you know, trying to, you know, essentially doing tryouts from team to team to team, seeing, you know, what I can make as far as a practice squad is concerned along those lines, possibly going Canada route. You know, do I want to do that? Do I want to be taking this now young family and really with complete like insecurity on like don't know where really finances are going to be coming from, you know, or is it just me going all these places and my wife now staying home, you know, using her degree, getting a job, but yet we got this brand new baby that I'm going to be like, oh yeah, you provide for us while I try to go live out this dream area. So there was just so much uncertainty, and you know, that started to creep in, and just I wasn't really sure. And because I was like, well, I wasn't necessarily a starter for longer than a year, and I don't know like how much I can like what's actually going to be the result of all this. Then I started to doubt myself, my capabilities as well. So then I was like, you know what, maybe I just call it good. I'm going to graduate with 2 degrees. I can use those degrees. Maybe we just go this way. I can hang up my cleats and we can call it good. And so, you know, it was a combination of like all these different variables, all these uncertainty. But I would say the biggest one was the doubt that crept into me. Is now I started to doubt my own skills, my own abilities, my own possible like opportunity, because this was going to be, it wasn't really going to be up to me anymore. Like getting onto a college team, it's like I can go and try out, and you know, I know that there would be enough opportunities in college, but in the NFL, it's pretty finite opportunities. Mm-hmm. There's only so many spots, and how many guys are actually, you know, going to go try out for those areas. So that was the biggest thing, is so much uncertainty and so much doubt that I was like, you know what, let's go this way. Now, hindsight is I should have at least done pro day. Like I should have at least done that. So then I would have known for myself, like, you know, how that valuation would have looked. But I didn't even allow myself that.
Yeah. And how did you cope with that? Right. Like it's really hard. I mean, at any level, you know, an athlete at any level, it's really tough to stop playing the sport that you love, especially when you grow up and you've got, you know, these larger than life type of role models that you want to live up to your own goals and your own hype inside your head. How do you deal with that sort of letdown essentially when you decide to give things up?
You know, that was the hardest thing. And I wish I could be one who was like, you know, it was easy. It was an easy transition because I could focus on my wife, on my family, right? Focus on a career. But what happened is, you know, after I graduated that spring and started out there trying to find something in the workforce, and there was nothing. I remember putting out roughly about 200 applications to jobs, and I got one interview, and it was for like a full-time 100% commission type area. Like, this is not what 2 degrees was supposed to get me. 2 degrees was supposed to get me at least, you know, a good type salary position job somewhere that I could provide for my family, you know, and have some type of security. And so, you know, this kind of like it just kept being obstacle after obstacle, and really none of these things were really falling into place. And so it made that transition even harder because, you know, didn't really find anything. We're like barely scraping by with some of the jobs I was finding. And really there were jobs that anyone out of high school could get. So I'm feeling let down with my college education. I'm feeling let down all these things. And then all of a sudden it's September again and football rolls on. And I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I not out on the field? And that first year I couldn't watch college ball. I couldn't watch the NFL. I couldn't watch anything. It was hard enough to even watch like Little League because I'm like, I need to still be playing. I need to be being paid for playing because no one values my skills. No one values my education. So maybe maybe I should go and play. And that year was so hard. And, going into the next year, still couldn't really find anything. I'm still trying to find the right job, still not happening. And second year rolls around and football comes back again, and exact same emotions, feelings come again. I'm like, this sucks. I'm like I can't do this. And so, luckily I had a former teammate. He gave me a call. He's like, hey, why don't you come down? Let's go sell some security systems down in Texas. I'm like, well, I got nothing better to do. I was like, at least I'll be with a former teammate. So I'm like, all right, let's go down in that. And, it was nice because I was with like not just one, but there was actually a couple former teammates. And then half of our team that was selling were former athletes. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is how life is after sports, right? On this end. And so, but still, like, not having the success financially, and that every time that was a letdown made it so much harder knowing that the sports career ended, because it's like I just continued to feel that the only value I could provide was on the football field. Like, no one valued me as an individual. No one valued what I actually learned education-wise, skills I developed that way. And so I continued to kind of doubt myself as far as being out there in the workforce. And so I'm like, I need to go back. Like, I know I'm 3 years removed now, but I need to go play football. Like, that's the only value I can provide to society, because society doesn't want me outside of that. And it was hard because it was constantly this battle. And really that took me down a path where, severe depression, ended up attempting to take my life twice. And it was after that second one, 6 years post college, that really I had kind of a come to Jesus moment. And it was one, I just had my third kid, and still financially it was such a struggle. By this time I'd put in over 400 applications for jobs and still nothing. And it was one of those that I remember setting, I was on the railroad tracks, and I knew what time a train came at night, typically about 10:30 at night, on this very rural street that no one ever goes down. And so I remember going there, all the lights were turned off. I was kind of at peace. I'm like, you know what? And at the time I actually had opened up an insurance agency, and I was like, you know what? I got a good life insurance policy. Family will be taken care of the way that I had kind of always intended. They'll have a couple million. And so, I'm good with this. And train usually came at 10:30 at night. By 11:15, been sitting on those railroad tracks for 45 minutes, no train. And, it was at that moment I heard God and basically said, your kids don't need life insurance money. They need a father and a leader. Mm-hmm. Your wife doesn't need money. She needs a husband. And it was really at that moment I was like, well, I better get my act together. I better, figure this stuff out, because now I'm 6 years removed. I'm not going to play football. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to play professionally. This is not going to happen. So I better figure this out. So for me, it was a long process in order to get to that spot where I could feel really at peace with that part of my life actually ending. But it took really, a 6-year battle in order to get to that point. And then 7 years of really healing and figuring out how to deal with those emotions and then move on beyond it. And that's an area that, come to find out, I wasn't alone. I felt alone at the time. Felt like, that something was wrong with me. I'm like, why can't I just move past this, along those lines? So, but yeah, it was definitely a lot longer process than I ever would imagine or thought, or, no one had ever told me how hard it would be once your career ended, and whether or not it ended on the right terms for you.
Yeah. Now you figure out a way of getting off those train tracks and talking yourself off the ledge and saying I need to get my act together. There's people that are in my life who I want to be here for and want me to be here for them. Outside of just the family aspect of it, you take that and you start business. You start working for yourself. How hard was that to kind of establish those things, and what what was that newer moment that kind of had you fulfilled that you were working in your newer passion?
Yeah, I mean, really, it was definitely strength, right? It reminded me of a time when I had determined I was like, okay, hey, I'm going to Utah State. I'm going to go now, and hey, I got to make sure that not only am I the hardest worker out there, but now I got to earn a scholarship, right? It started me really with now a new focus, right? And now one that I could put in all those years of work and training and everything, be like, this is it, right? This is my new NFL. This is my new, hey, ultimate goal, because it's not going to just impact my life. It's going to impact my children's life, but also it's going to impact others around me. And at the end of the day, I remember my wife, because she always asked me, she's like, well, why did you ever want to, be a professional athlete? What was your, drive outside of football? Was it fame? It's like, it was never fame. It was always the fact that, one, I could play a sport and get paid for playing something that you love. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
who wouldn't want that, right? I mean, hey, here's some money, go play a sport, right? It's like, psh, yeah, who wouldn't want that? But at the same token, as I looked, I was like, but being an NFL star gives you a platform to help impact other people's lives. And for me, that's really the driving force. The older I got, I'm like, that's what it was of why I wanted to go to the NFL. It wasn't for the fame, it was for the building a platform that I could help impact other people's lives. And then when I came to realize I don't need the NFL to have a platform, I can go make my own platform. Is it going to be hard work? Oh, yeah. Is it going to be a grind? Absolutely. But you want to know what? Walking on to a D1 university is no easy cakewalk. Walking on and having to earn respect is not easy. There was plenty of guys that came on with me as preferred walk-ons. They weren't on the team after a year. I remember when I graduated my 5th year, there was not only that, but the class I came in on, guys that were on scholarship, our there was 25 of us in that first year. My senior graduating class of us football players, there was, if I remember right, 12. And 3 of them were JC transfers. So it's like, it wasn't hard it is not easy to stick it through. And I'm like, I did it. Like, I stuck through especially on a team that I had family members, I had friends. They're like, dude, Utah State sucks. Like, get out of there. Transfer out of it. Like, go somewhere else that you can have success on the football field. Like, they suck. I was like, you know what? But I have the chance to change the culture there. I have the chance to help establish maybe a better framework. And, the year after I graduated, that was the first year that they went to a bowl game since, I think it was like 93 or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I helped to change that culture, guys. Like, that was part of my impact. That was part of my legacy to see where they are today. And so that's when I looked at it, the business, I was like, I've done this before. This is the exact same thing that I did going into college. I can do this. I can devote the time and energy it takes to build this the right way.
Yeah. So outside of the athletes that you work with, that you help them make the same transition that you made, you're a dad. And before we got on, you were talking to me about how your daughter made both the volleyball team and the cheerleading team. And you said you sat her down and she's an eighth grader and you're like, okay, how serious are you about these things? Was that a was that a conversation that you had because you had the experience of it, or of just the experience of being a high level athlete, or did you experience that sort of conversation growing up as well?
So I never experienced that conversation because you know my my parents didn't. It was kind of uncharted territory because both my sisters, they were cheerleaders in high school, but after high school they just stopped. I mean, it
Hmm.
wasn't something that they wanted to do. Um, I I remember my sister, she did try out at Utah State. We both went to Utah State, but I remember said she went and tried out. She didn't make the team, but after that, she's like, you know what? College is more than that. And she got into the whole party atmosphere in college, and she loved that more than she ever loved cheerleading. And so, it wasn't one like my parents. They didn't really necessarily know, right? I mean, I remember them having conversations with like, "Are you sure you want to actually do this? Like, you could always concentrate more on these other things." I'm like, "No, I really want to do it." And so because I didn't necessarily have that, that went totally into, why I'm having these conversations with my daughter now. It's like, hey, if you're serious about this, right, let's talk about it. But also, going back to kind of what you mentioned earlier of that transition I had out of sports, that negative transition, is how do I prepare her? Because at some point, she's going to be done with sports, whether that's out of high school, whether it's out of college, whether it's a couple years and some professional level. At some point, your sports career ends, and how do you then not have that negative transition? And so, for me, it's helping to build her outside of sports. It's like, hey, look, I'm going to help you build what type of character you need to be in order to be a great athlete. But what you have to focus on is being this person that isn't an athlete. Like for me, that's where my identity was an athlete. And so it was so hard for me to separate those two afterwards because I'm like, well, dude, I'm no one. And especially not getting any type of traction with like a job and being valued in the workforce made that like identity almost solidified in the fact of I am only valued as an athlete. And so I have to be an athlete. And so that's one of the things that I always keep in the forefront with talking with my daughter is let's discuss more about who you are outside of your sport.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it's a big thing, right? You're valued as one thing for most of your life. Oh, and that's your identity. Oh, he plays football. Oh, he's a baseball player. He throws 95 as a 17-year-old. You know what I mean? Like those are the things that you're labeled for. You're not labeled for being a 4.0 student. You're not labeled for, acing the exam. That's not the things that they're really talking about on ESPN during games. They're talking about whether or not you're a Heisman prospect. They may talk about some other, watch list that you're on, but they're not talking about the academic side. So the value that you bring is based off of the identity that you have that translates from the field. And it goes into everything now, right? NIL is incredible, and it's great that they have a route to make some money while they're in college because as you know, as a college athlete, you don't have much time for work. So
Yeah.
it's great that they can do that, but now you're seeing the value of them just being athletes increasing, right? You're now seeing more of, the haters and the fans saying, well, you should just stick to sports. You're seeing that more because that's the only thing that they value as is an entertainment factor. So the fact that you're having these conversations with your daughter already, and you said she's an eighth grader right now, and she said she's ready to buy into playing volleyball in college, that's huge, and that's something that translates. And I feel like the generations before us didn't didn't know about those things. So the fact that we do and we're trickling them down is huge. And I feel like that's what you're doing with your daughter of, hey, this is something I did. I know what it takes to be a high level athlete, and this is what I want to bring to you. How receptive has she been to those things outside of saying she wants to play at the next level?
So I think that conversation was really good because her game yesterday, they crosstown kind of rival area, and they got smoked. They got swept. three sets to nothing. And I remember after the game, she was completely frustrated with her team, and I remember looking at her. I was like, "Hey, look. One thing that being an athlete teaches you is how to be a leader, but there's two types of leaders. There's a vocal leader, and then a leader that just gets stuff done. One thing that I always was a leader that just got stuff done. People like, no, Adrian's going to work as hard, and they're following me because I don't ever stop. One thing, and I told her, I was like, one thing I wish I would have done better with my team, especially at Utah State, was been more of a vocal leader, because we needed a lot of those vocal leaders. I was like, I want you to learn how to do that, because as soon as sports ends, you need to know how to lead people, because throughout life, you are going to be called upon to lead at different times for different things. Think of being a mother. I mean, your mom, she leads all the time. So you're going to have to develop these skills, and sports is a great spot for you to learn how to develop them, because you're put right in the moment of them. And I remember her later that evening coming to me like, Dad, I know how to, I know how to develop a kind of like what you're talking about on the leadership side, but how do I get faster? How do I jump higher? And really seeing her say that, because I saw the other team, I was like, she's comparing herself to the setter on the other team. Mm-hmm. That other setter, she was quicker. She, her jump serves were better. Her sets, she was getting up higher. That setter also had, done a couple spikes as well. I'm like, she is now starting to recognize, oh, these are skill sets that I need to develop if I want to be competitive. And so just that willingness, because I know what areas she needs to work on, but it was something that my wife and I had talked about, and she's like, she was kind of always fearful. She's like, I don't want you to push our kids into sports because of you not actually making it on the professional level. I'm like, I'm not going to, but I'll tell you what, if they come to me and tell me that they want to make it at a high level, that's when I'll push them. Mm-hmm. And my wife's like, but I'm like, no. It's their decision. Once it's their decision, I'm going to support them and go that route. So that's always been kind of my mentality, is once it's your decision, okay, it's go time. And then now we're going to go. And so seeing it's like, okay, this is her decision. It's now moving into, okay, now let's really dissect, like, what is that skills that you need to have, and let's go and get those.
Yeah. That's, on a professional level, on a dad level, everything kind of translates. And I feel like it all kind of boils up from sports, learning how to be a vocal leader, learning how to be the person that kind of puts your head down and gets things done and kind of shuts the world out to make sure that these happen. All of these things do certainly come from sports. And, I feel like you completely embody all of those things of, working hard on, the mental side, the physical side, and then kind of have it all built from there. And it's been incredible to sit here and talk to you about all these different things. And, I'm probably biased, 'cause I always love talking to fellow defensive backs, because I think we're the best athletes on the field. There should be more of us winning the Heisman Trophy.
There should be. It's a shame that, the last one was it Desmond Howard? Was he really the last one?
I think so, honestly. Yeah, I don't think that there's been any. They kind of changed things with Smith, who's now an Eagle, winning it as a wide receiver. But you look at that list, it's nothing but quarterbacks. So.
And a few running backs sprinkled in every now and then, right?
Occasionally, the ones that can carry the load for their quarterbacks that aren't as good, they get in there. But it's an offensive-driven award. But like I said, I love always talking to defensive backs and people that have similar mentalities of my own, but bring a different perspective of things. So it's been really, really awesome. Before I let you go, two things. first, and I know there's been a couple of points of advice throughout this entire conversation, but what's a point of advice, maybe something that you've learned and lived by, or something that somebody told you, or an experience that you had that you can share with that next generation?
One of the things, and it's mentality that I had, as a young kid, because I was the smallest one, is, hey, you can always outwork your competition. But it really became solidified in college, right? Because going in, all of a sudden, especially I think it was like my redshirt sophomore year, and we're bringing in recruits like, oh, this is a 3-star guy, this is a 4-star guy, and I remember one of the recruits came in and he was pretty sure himself. It's like, yeah, I'm a 4-star recruit, blah blah. He's like, well, what are you? I'm like, dude, it doesn't matter. It's like, what do you mean it doesn't matter? I'm like, get on the field 1-on-1 with me, and then you tell me how many stars I should be. And because it was always like, stars are telling you like kind of where you are, out of high school, which is great. But I saw more 5-star guys come in that essentially never improved, and they stayed the same where they were at high school 5 years after college. And I'm like, you know what? Stars just tell you like, what your natural talents are, but hard work will outperform stars any given day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was always one that really got solidified to me in college was, stars don't matter. What matters is your work ethic. What matters is how do you develop your skills. You can always develop skills if you're willing to put in the work. I went in my freshman year, and like I said, I had that grading scale from my coach, and he basically graded me I think it was like a 47 out of 100. And I was like, all right. I was like, well, I'll improve this by double by next year. He's like, there's no way. He's like, there's no way you're going to get like in the mid 80s. I'm like, watch me. And so that's the biggest thing. I think that was solidified. And advice I have is like, don't worry about, where others think that you are today. Know what you're capable of doing. And, with your mind in the right place, your body will follow it, and you'll be capable of really astronomical things that you never thought was possible.
So last thing is, where can people find you? Kind of let people know what the platform is, and social media handles, anything else like that before I let you go.
Yeah. Social media wise, at Adrian Bybee on Twitter, at Adrian Bybee on Instagram. Nice part about being, I Googled myself a while ago. I'm the only Adrian Bybee out there. So I'm like, I'm going to utilize that. So, but I'm most active on Twitter, or I guess X now. And then also on LinkedIn. Those would be probably my most active channels. Probably because I hate taking pictures. So you got to have pictures for Instagram. And then likewise, I'll have a podcast that will be up and running here within the next month as well. You can get more information on that one just on my website, which is just adrianbybee.net. I had to think about that one. So,
yeah. Well, hopefully people start reaching out. Looking forward to listening to the podcast when it comes out. But Adrian, this was great. I'm going to let you go. You got anything else for us before I end the recording today?
Last thing I'll say is, hey, you'll always be an athlete. So never have the mentality of, you're only an athlete for a certain period of time. No, you'll be an athlete all your life, and learn how to leverage all of those skill set. You may not be able to run that 4.40 anymore, but you can still run in your mind and run circles around other people that would never experience that life as an athlete.
Thank you for listening to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you don't miss when another episode drops. Again, we appreciate you listening, and we'll see you again next time.